hope you are having such a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining me live today. I hope you are really excited. We have got a lot to talk about when it comes to small groups. I have loved sitting here, looking at the comments, seeing what grade you teach, where you're from. We've got people from all over, so welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I would love to know if this is your first workshop with me. Maybe you have absolutely no idea who I am, or if you have done some workshops with me in the past. I know we just wrapped up a big book study this summer, and so the past few workshops I've done, I've seen some familiar faces, but I'd love to know, is this your first time, or if you have you been on a workshop before? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brittany Heggie. I am the math-obsessed educator behind Mix and Math. I have experience teaching in upper elementary and doing interventionist work and coaching work in both upper elementary and middle school. And now I work with teachers. I do professional development and help teachers really build their own understanding of the concepts they're teaching so that they can better support their students. I am obsessed with math manipulatives. I believe they belong in every classroom, especially those upper elementary grades, where a lot of times we think that they are too babyish for students, and they're not. Anytime students are learning something new, they need to experience that concrete phase. And so I'm on a mission to get math manipulatives in every upper elementary classroom. So, okay, I see lots of first timers here. Welcome. Jennifer said it's her first time, and Rhea and Keisha and Nancy. Awesome. Okay, so we have got a jam-packed hour, so we are going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch over to my slides. We will have a time for Q&A at the end, so know that there will be a time to get your questions answered, but let me go ahead and switch over just a sec. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So 3 must-have elements for effective math small groups that meet the learning needs of all your students. So by the end of this workshop, I'm going to show you how to make the shift from one-size-fits-all lessons to planning in a way that meets the needs of your students by selecting the right learning targets, incorporating all different types of small group structures, and strategically using math manipulatives, because we know all 3 of these go into really effective small groups. So you might be here because you often feel overwhelmed by the wide range of students' needs. The reason or the inspiration for this workshop was because in our upper elementary math teachers Facebook group, so many teachers, almost daily when we have requests, one of the questions is like, what are you struggling with? What do you want to learn about? And daily, somebody has mentioned the fact that I want to learn how to do small groups because I have such a wide range of needs and I just don't know how to meet all the needs with the structure I'm currently using. So if that's you, put a 1 in the comments. 2, you may have tried teaching through small groups before and it just didn't go as you'd hoped. If that's the case, give me a 2 in the comments. Let me know if this resonates with you. Number 3, you're wondering what it might look like to incorporate math manipulatives into your small groups. So we all know that it's best practice to use math manipulatives in the classroom, but nobody's really teaching us how to do that or what that looks like. And then lastly, you just want to feel confident in your ability to meet the learning needs of all of your students. So let me know which of these resonates with you the most in the comments, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Yeah, I see some 3s with a lot of exclamation points. So 4, 2, 2 and 4, 1. Okay, awesome. You are in the right place. So let's go through this, the workshop agenda real quick before we jump in. So we're going to start by looking at how to choose the right learning targets, because really that is the key. That's like our roadmap. So we've got to have good learning targets before we jump into planning anything. Then we're going to talk about choosing the right small group structure, because there's 3 different types of small group and they are all extremely important and some lend themselves better to our learning goals. Then we're going to talk about selecting hands-on tasks for all students. We will talk about math manipulatives, the role that they play, and how to make sure that we're using them in a way that is actually building students' understanding, that's supporting students, and not using them in a way that's really ineffective. And then we will talk about next steps to continue learning. Like I said, this is a 1-hour workshop. It's almost like a crash course. I'm going to give you everything I can, but we do have like a follow-up opportunity if you want to meet with other teachers and talk about how to actually implement this for your specific classroom. And then we'll get to the Q&A. We will answer a ton of questions. So we've got a couple teachers that are gathering some questions and putting them on a Google Doc. So if you have a question, drop it in there, and I will get to as many as I can at the end. Okay, so before we get started, I want to frame your mindset going into this. So I don't want you to hear anything today and be like, well, that's not going to work for me because XYZ, because of your students, because of your district expectations, because of the length of your math block. Instead, I really want you to approach this with the mindset of, how can I make this work for me, my students, and my math curriculum? If you don't allow that resistance in, you will learn so much today. All right, so let's get started with choosing the right learning targets for your lesson. So I want to start with a quote, and I'm warning you now, it's a wordy quote. I came across this when it was in my assessment course when I was getting my master's in elementary math education, and it was fantastic, and it changed so much about how I approach planning lessons. And so we're going to break it down together. So let's start with the first part. It says the question must shift from who is mastering standards to how is each student doing on his or her journey up the scaffolding leading to each standard. So let's break that part down first. So it's not, does a student get it or do they not? It is, how close are they to getting it? Where are they on the learning journey, and what understanding do they need to build to get to a place of mastering that standard? There's a difference there. So let's break down the second part. It says, it's never the case that at first a student can't meet the standard and then all at once can. Over time, the student ascends through progressive levels of mastery of prerequisites leading up to mastery of that standard. Again, kind of wordy. Let's break it down. So it's not that one activity or one day a student doesn't get it and the very next day they all of a sudden get it. What happens is they are almost like building understanding in these little building blocks, or they're taking little baby steps and they're moving forward and moving towards mastery of the standard. So our job is to figure out where are students at on that learning journey. And one of the reasons I think this is so powerful is because it recognizes that every student is on the road. Every student knows something. We just need to figure out where they're at and how we can move them forward, instead of just viewing it as, well, this kid gets it, this kid doesn't, this kid does, and this kid does. We need to see where they're at. And so one of the biggest mistakes that I used to make lesson planning was I would choose learning targets that were way too big for one lesson. And so what this looked like for me, and let me know in the comments if this is you, if you are guilty of it. So I used to look at the standard, the pacing guide that the district gave. They said, okay, you need to teach 5 and F1. And I'm like, okay, that's adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. I would copy the standard, put it in Google, and see all of the activities that came up about the standard. And I would be like, okay, well, this one looks engaging and this one's hands-on. And so let me download all these activities. And we would do the activities until students got it. And that was kind of the planning process. And there was no sequencing of activities or anything like that. So let me know if that's you, if you've been there before. So what I learned is by doing that, I was not helping students move along this journey. There was no logical sequence. I wasn't building those prerequisites that would allow them to, build the understanding for the next stop in the journey. And so when we have learning targets that are not these big ones, that are not just what the standards say, but they're broken down and thinking about what understanding is needed in order to get students to mastering that standard, those tiny little learning targets build our roadmap for learning. And so without those clear and specific learning targets, it's really difficult to know where students are currently and where we want to guide them to. And so let's take a look at what this looks like. Let's say for like place value with whole numbers, for example. So we're going to give you an example learning roadmap. So in this with this concept right here, a lot of times the approach that we often take with teaching place value is our instruction revolves around, can they identify what place a digit is in, and then can they identify the value of that digit? And that's really the extent of it. But in order for students to be able to do that, there is actually a learning target, or there's a piece of understanding that they need to have before that. And that's this first one. They have to understand the grouping nature of our number system. So they have to understand that 10 tens make 100, and 10 100s make 1,000. And they need to recognize that just because a 2 is in the hundreds place, that 2 is made up of 200s, or it's made up of 20 tens, or it's made up of 200 ones. Like they're seeing that pattern, that groups of 10 nature of our base 10 system. And then from there, then we can move into identifying the value of a digit in a multi-digit whole number. So some students may be able to identify the value at kind of a more like procedural or surface level type of way. So they may see a number, they may put it in a place value chart, and they may see, oh, okay, the 2 is in the tens place, so it has a value of 20. But are they recognizing exactly what that means? Do they understand it at a deeper level? And that's a critical piece of understanding, because when we think about like operations with multi-digit whole numbers, when we are regrouping and we're having to decompose numbers, that is when we recognize when students haven't mastered that first learning target. So we've got these 2 learning targets. And then lastly, we move to explaining the relationship between the value of digits in different places. This builds on the understanding of learning target 1 and 2. If they haven't mastered learning target 1 and 2, they're really going to struggle with this learning target 3. And so this is why this learning roadmap is so important. There's 3 reasons. So 1, you can strategically plan out lessons that build on one another throughout the unit. So thinking back to old Brittany and how she used to plan, because I didn't have a learning roadmap, because I didn't have specific learning targets, I had no intentionality or no strategy for how I was planning these lessons. And so now with this roadmap, I can say, okay, this activity makes sense for this learning target. And I'm going to create an activity that makes sense for this learning target. And I'm going to connect what I'm doing in this activity to what students did in the last task. And so it gives us that roadmap. It also helps us determine where students are at in the learning roadmap. So instead of seeing like, oh, a student can or can't explain the relationship between these 2 digits, it's like, okay, they can't do that yet, but where are they at? And what's the logical next step? Or what's the next piece of understanding that I need to guide them towards? And then also, you know exactly what understanding you want to guide students towards during the small group. If we are not intentional with the learning target that we are focusing on in a small group, then that small group time is not going to be as effective. So here's kind of your action item for this first part. And let me know in the comments, does this make sense? Do you, where are you at with this? Are you planning kind of more broad learning targets? If you are, that's totally okay. We've had so many teachers who have said, my learning targets are definitely way too big. Like my takeaway with this section is I've got to break them down. So your action item is to choose a math concept for your grade level, and I want you to spend time breaking it down into the smallest building blocks that lead to the big learning goal. Now, a great question to ask yourself, or a great thing to consider if you're struggling with how to create this learning roadmap, is a lot of times, especially if you've taught a grade before, this, like if you're the grade that you're currently teaching, if you've taught it before, a lot of times we will get frustrated and we'll say, man, if a student only knew X, then they would be able to do Y. And whatever that X is, whatever that thing is that you're frustrated that students don't know or haven't mastered, that's keeping them from understanding what you're trying to teach, that's probably something that should be in your learning roadmap. That's probably should be one of your learning targets. So that's a great question to ask yourself. So this is a great action item for you to do at some point before you start the school year. So let's talk about, and real quick, I'm going to check in with the comments. So yes, makes total sense. I'm getting better at breaking it down. I've never thought about breaking it down. I have a lot to learn. Heidi, that's totally okay. When I tell you there are so many teachers, we've had thousands of teachers who have come through this workshop this week. There are so many who have said the exact same thing. I think this is something, and let me actually point this out real quick. So when we're talking about these learning targets, a lot of times we talk about the importance of a learning progression. And when you Google learning progression, you will see how a concept connects across grade levels. So you'll see that in 3rd grade, multiplication looks like this. And in 4th grade, it builds on that and it looks like this. And then in 5th grade, it goes even further. And so while that is so great, and that's important, and we want that for vertical alignment, we want to know what students are coming into our grade level with, or what they should be, and where they're going, that's fantastic. But this learning roadmap, or sometimes it's called a learning trajectory, this is like zooming in on that. This is like, what are all of the things that, what's the progression within that grade? So it's a zoomed in version of that learning progression, and it's really important, and I don't think it's talked about enough. So, okay, now we can move on to choosing the right small group structure for the learning goal. So once you have a learning goal, that is going to determine maybe what the best setting is for building students' understanding of that target or of that concept. And it's not that any specific structure is necessarily designed for any specific learning target, but you'll notice as we look at the 3 different types of small groups that some lend themselves to others. Some have different levels of teacher support. And so just knowing these structures is going to be really helpful when you're talking about planning lessons. So let's take a look. We've got our learning target, our learning roadmap here. So let's say that I want to start with learning target 1. I want this is how we're starting place value with whole numbers. I want students to explore our number system. I really want them to make discoveries and recognize patterns, and the patterns that are recognized may sound different from student to student. And so I want to be able to have some whole class discussions about this. And so with that, the first type of small group that I might use for that first learning target is whole group. Now, I know you may be saying, like, wait, how is whole group a type of small group? Well, whole group now in a lot of classrooms looks really different than what whole group looked like when we were students. When I was a student, whole group looked like everybody sitting at their desk and the teacher standing at the front, and the teacher was modeling how to do a procedure, and then everybody in the class would have time to practice it on their own. And that's not what a whole group looks like now, or it's not what it should look like. Instead, whole group is really, I love the way Julie Dixon calls it. She calls it concurrent small groups. I've also heard it called non-rotational small groups. And so everybody in the class is working in small groups, and they're all working on the same or a similar task. Now, don't get held up on this right now, because we're going to talk about tasks. Like, the entire next part of this workshop is all about choosing tasks that meet the needs of all your students, so you're not having to plan a million different activities for all of your kids every day. So they're working on the same or similar task. They are grouped heterogeneously, and they're working together. So during this time, the teacher is hopping in and out of those small groups in order to support students. Maybe they're stuck, helping them move along, maybe even to push students thinking a little bit deeper. There was this terminology. I've always done it this way, but I loved that this book, I think it may have been like Math Exchanges or something like that. I can't remember if it's that one. But they use the terminology catch and release. And so if you've ever been to an in-person workshop with me, I do a lot of catch and release. So I'll release everybody to work with their teachers in their own small groups. And maybe I'll see that everybody has a really common misconception. And so I'll bring everybody back in and we'll talk about it. And then I'll release them back to work in their small groups. Or maybe I'll hear something from one group that I'm like, oh, this is great. And I think it's going to maybe change the direction that teachers, the teachers are the students in this workshop, the direction that they're going. And so I'll bring them back in and I'll share this, and maybe it'll spark an idea, and other groups will try it. And so we'll try it. And so I'll release them back out. So it's that catch and release. The teacher's facilitating, but the teacher is not directly teaching. This is a time of discovery and exploration and discussion. And then the teacher will likely bring everybody back in for a whole group discussion where students are sharing their aha moments, their takeaways, what they've learned. Maybe the teacher is sequencing some work samples. So you may want to show one student's work, and maybe they did it in a way that was, maybe not as efficient, but it was still really valuable. Like maybe they used manipulatives, or maybe they used pictures. And then you have some students who maybe use some type of written strategy. Maybe it wasn't an algorithm, but they used numbers and symbols to solve it. And you want to show both of those to the whole class and compare, because that actually does help all students in the class, no matter where they're at, to see these different strategies. It deepens their understanding of it. And so that's what the teacher is doing during this time. It's using students' work to move everyone towards the learning goal. So here we have whole group, which is like small groups in whole group. And then the next stop, or the next type of small group that we have, is independent groups. Now, most of the time, people call independent groups, they would say math centers, but it doesn't have to be math centers. It could be math centers, it could be a choice board, it could be a math menu. Essentially, independent small groups are groups that are independent of the teacher, and everybody is working on a meaningful task. They're either working in small groups on that meaningful task, or they're working on their own. So it's whatever, I guess, like structure or setup that you want. We'll talk about this later as well, but the tasks don't necessarily have to be different depending on whether you are doing a rotational model, whether you're putting tasks in a choice board. So students can rotate through these if you want, or you can just assign students to a specific center or to a specific task or to a specific part of the math menu for each day. There's so many options here, but the key is that all of this is independent of the teacher. And so during our math rotations, if you choose to go with rotations, students don't have to see every center every day. They could only see 1 or 2 centers per day. It depends on the length of your math block. It depends on the types of tasks that you have there. I think it's a misconception that if you do math centers, students have to go through 4 a day. And so now you're having to plan, however many math centers for that week. It doesn't have to be like that. So it depends on the task that you choose. So then the last type of small group is the pulled small group. And this typically, a lot of teachers think about this as like the teacher table. So you're picturing like a kidney-shaped table, teacher in the center, students around. And so that's the third type of small group. It's the one that has, I would say, like the most contact with the teacher. That does not mean it is the only time that we can meet students' needs, but it is more closely teacher facilitated, but it's still very much student-centered. So this type of small group is typically between 10 and 20 minutes long, either with heterogeneous groups or homogeneous groups of students. I'm gonna take a break real quick. Let me know if you're still with me. I don't know if my chat is frozen or not, but let me know if you're good, you got it, you understand the first types of small groups. Okay, we're gonna jump back into this. So 10 to 20 minutes long, either heterogeneously grouped or homogeneously grouped. Now, I mentioned Julie Dixon just a second ago, but we did a book study a couple years ago. It was a book that Julie Dixon and a couple of other teachers wrote. And the term that she used, I absolutely loved. She calls it moderately heterogeneous grouping. And I love this term because I think a lot of times when we talk about heterogeneous groups, which in all of these, we likely are grouping heterogeneously. I think teachers can get really intimidated by that because we immediately picture the student who maybe is struggling the most in the class and the student who is got it and maybe they're a whole lot further ahead than other students in the class. And we're thinking about grouping those two students together and we panic about how we facilitate that. How is that beneficial for everybody? And so I love that she uses the word moderately heterogeneously because she talks about grouping where there is that variation in understanding and ability to represent their thinking and all of that without outliers. And so I think that the more you group heterogeneously, the more comfortable you become facilitating groups where there's a wider range. So that was just a little nugget I wanted to share. It doesn't necessarily have to be heterogeneous does not mean our two ends of the spectrum. It can be some variation kind of like in the same area, if that makes sense. So heterogeneous is great when we're wanting to build conceptual understanding, when there is understanding that we are wanting to, or there's thinking that we are wanting to like dive really deep into. Homogeneous is great when we are trying to address a specific misconception that everybody in the group has, or maybe you are working on a skill that is more procedural in nature. That's a great time to group homogeneously. Another thing about the pulled small group, who you group together and how often you meet with them is not going to be the same for everybody, and that's okay. It is truly based on formative and observational data. And so I don't know if I've mentioned that all 3 of these groups work together, but during that time of whole group, that's a great time to gather some observational data and decide who you need to meet with, for what purpose, and how frequently you need to meet with them. Know that this does not have to happen every day for every student. It's okay to meet with some students one day and some more students another day. And it's okay if you meet with some students multiple times that week and not another week. It can look different. We want to have that flexibility. Now, you may be thinking, well, how does that work if I'm using math rotations? The best tip that I can give you is that if you are using a rotational model, do not put your teacher table or your teacher small group in the rotations. There's a couple reasons for this. One, if the teacher table is part of the rotations, then that means you are limited to the amount of time for that rotation. You also are limited to meeting with the group of students that are already grouped together. If you pull the teacher's table or the pulled small group out of that rotation, then you can pull students and meet with them for as long as you want or as short as you want. And you can group students truly in a flexible way because you're not limited to the preset groups of the preset groups like for the centers. So yes, those are the three types of small groups right there. We've got the whole group, independent group, and the pulled small group. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments which one you tend to lean more heavily towards. Is there one that you feel a whole lot more comfortable with? I would encourage you this upcoming school year to explore all three types and figure out how you can get them to work together. So I love what is it Karima? I love what you said about you're stealing the term moderately homogeneous grouping. Yes, like I said, it is not my terminology. The first time I heard about it was from Julie Dixon, but it was such an aha moment for me in talking about those heterogeneous groups. Okay, good. I see whole group, independent, whole group. I never thought about not putting the teacher table in the rotation. Interesting. Yes, it allows for so much more flexibility. Okay, so your action item here. I want you to evaluate the structure of your math block. Are you utilizing all types of small groups, or does your structure allow for flexibility? One thing I don't think I have it, I've adjusted the workshop because some of the previous workshops went way long. But one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that a lot of times we are looking for the perfect math block structure, and that truly, truly, truly does not exist. If you have the exact same, like it's 5 minutes here and 10 minutes here and 30 minutes here and 20 minutes with this, and it's the same every single day, you are locking yourself into this box, and it's not allowing for extending the learning in one part of the lesson when it's needed. And so we've got these different types of small groups, and it may be that you utilize every small group every day. You don't have to, but it may be that on the first day, I like to sometimes plan lessons, especially if you have a short math block, plan lessons in chunks. So maybe it is that one lesson will span 2 days. And so that first day, you may have a lot more time in that whole group, and then the independent small groups are shorter. And then the next day, when you start with whole group, it's a shorter period of time. Maybe it's addressing a misconception, or it's giving students a piece of understanding that they need to move into their independent groups. And that independent group makes up more of the math block that day. It's okay for days to look different. That's actually NCTM. I posted a quote over on Instagram. NCTM says that that's effective math teaching, is letting the learning goal drive the structure of your math block. Okay, so now we're moving into selecting tasks that meet the learning needs of all of your students. So, did you know, I know I mentioned this before, but did you know you do not have to plan different activities for all students at all different levels in your classroom? A quality math task paired with the right supports can meet the needs of all learners. I don't know where this idea came from, that the only way to differentiate is to have different activities for every student at every level. I love what Tracy Zager wrote the book, like Becoming the Math Teacher. I wish I'd had her, something like that. I always butcher the name of her book, but her and I connected years ago, and we were talking about differentiation at the beginning of this last school year. And she talked about how they don't call it differentiation anymore in her district. They call it equitable facilitation. And I love that. So essentially, I've been waiting for her to put out a training on it so I can direct everybody to it, because I just love that terminology. And I think she would nail doing a presentation on that. But what we're talking about here is we have these tasks, and it could be the task itself that's differentiated, or it could be the way that we use the task. And it's how can we facilitate it in a way that's equitable. And so what I talk a lot about is the use of math manipulatives, because math manipulatives provide that support and extension to allow every child to access a task, a quality task. So let's take a look at the math manipulative matrix, because I put together this matrix last summer. What I've found is that a lot of times math manipulatives may be used in math centers or in other types of small groups, but they're not necessarily furthering the learning. And here's why. So if we're looking at this matrix here, as we go up the matrix, this is increased engagement. So we're using math manipulatives in a way or for the purpose of engaging students. That is totally fine. A lot of time, I have activities that I've done with students where we're rolling dice for things, and the dice just add an element of excitement. If we are doing groups independent of the teacher, we need to make sure that they're engaging for students. That doesn't always mean a game. Students can be engaged by the math itself, but there's nothing wrong with using math manipulatives for engagement. And as we go towards the right of the grid, we are using math manipulatives to really with the focus of learning. So it is deepening their understanding of a concept or extending their understanding of a concept. And so that sweet spot is going to be that top right corner where we have high engagement and high learning coming from the use of math manipulatives. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So before I do that, I will say I've not ever experienced using math manipulatives where there's no engagement and no learning. Like usually you have one or the other there. So that bottom box, we're just going to leave empty. But let's take a look at that top left quadrant of the grid. So an example of this might be rolling dice to fill in missing numbers in a word problem. So maybe that, if I'm going to talk a lot about independent groups here, but a lot of what I'm talking about you could do in any type of group. But let's say you're doing math centers and this is an activity that you have. You've got a numberless word problem and students roll the dice, and whatever comes up on the dice, that is what numbers they put into the word problem. Now, let's think about this. Is that engaging? For a lot of students, yes, that is engaging. They get to roll the dice. It just adds an element of fun versus just solving the word problem. But are the math manipulatives being used in this way? Is it supporting students who maybe don't know how to solve that problem? Is it furthering their understanding of that concept? Let me know in the comments what you think. Somebody said, Richard, becoming the math teacher you wished you'd had. Thank you. So yes, in this situation, the math manipulatives are being used for engagement, but they are not being used to extend learning. So let's take a look at the bottom right corner of the matrix here. And this one is a little bit less engaging. The manipulatives are being a little bit more like in a rote type fashion, but it is supporting learners. And it's imagine you have a worksheet and it's adding and subtracting mixed numbers with unlike denominators, and you've got fraction tiles for students. So yeah, students who aren't ready to use the algorithm, having those tiles supports them and allows them to still accomplish the task. Now, is this in the sweet spot? No, because I think it's not necessarily allowing students to use the manipulatives flexibly. It's not as engaging. I think there's kind of a better way. Again, though, it's not bad, and neither is our top left corner either. But I think our sweet spot is when we can use math manipulatives in a way that is highly engaging and then also really deepen students' understanding of the concept. So I'm going to set the stage for this type of activity for you. So imagine you place a model or maybe take a picture of a number. Maybe it's, let's say, 1,240. And you tell students, I had modeled 1,240 and I was going to have you figure out what the value of it was just based on looking at the base 10 blocks. But somebody came in during lunch and stole some of my base 10 blocks. I have no idea where they're at. And I don't remember which blocks I need to which blocks I need to add to my model so that it does have a value of 1,240 again. And so this is the task. We've set it up. They're engaged because of that. They're engaged because they think somebody stole some math manipulatives, and it's their job to figure out which base 10 blocks are missing. Now, the reason I love this is because one, students can take a variety of approaches to figuring out what the missing base 10 blocks are. Some students who maybe are not necessarily thinking in like more of a using an algorithm as an approach, or maybe their thinking just isn't as sophisticated yet, they may add block by block to figure out, and they're kind of like adding up until they get to that value of 1,240. Other students may look at this and they may go straight to the algorithm, and that's perfectly okay. But do you see in this situation, it's one activity, it's one task, and we could have multiple of these at a center or in a small group. But do you see how it's one activity and everybody can approach it in some way at varying levels of efficiency? And so this to me is the sweet spot. It's engaging and it's extending students' learning. But I want to point out, as you are planning your small groups, if all of the hands-on activities fall solely in the engagement category, then we're really not providing the access and the differentiation that students need. So if your students are struggling and you're like, well, I'm using math manipulatives, consider how you are using them. What is the purpose of them? Is it hands-on for the purpose of engagement or hands-on for the purpose of learning? I saw something over on Instagram the other day, and it was students practicing their multiplication facts at a center, and they had taken those little task card boxes and they put sand in them, and then there were task cards that were just like, the multiplication facts, and they would write the answer in the sand in the task card. And while that's highly engaging and it's hands-on for engagement, because let's think about the students who don't know their multiplication facts. How is that sand helping them figure out the answer to that problem? It's not. So that's something to really, really be mindful of. I'd love to know, where do you typically feel like you fall on this matrix? Are you kind of more in the engagement, or more maybe in the bottom right-hand corner where it's more for learning? Or do you feel like you've mastered kind of hitting that sweet spot there? Okay. I had one teacher who reached out, and she had messaged me and said that manipulatives saved her math lessons this year. She had students of all abilities, and she started out using them. And the students who struggled quickly caught on once they could see the math, and her scores were so much higher, and she thinks it was because she started off with math manipulatives. And let me tell you, this is the story so often. And this is I can't remember if she's a 4th grade teacher or a 5th grade teacher, but math manipulatives are so valuable in upper elementary classrooms. So let's talk about how we can use math manipulatives to differentiate in those small groups. So I'm going to give you 3 ways that you can use them to differentiate, and I'm actually going to show you what that looks like with some activities. So first, we can use them to differentiate by changing the content of the activity without necessarily changing the learning goal. So if you take a look at this activity right here, the learning goal is understanding the grouping nature of our number system. Now, what we did with this activity is I changed the value of the blocks to meet the students' needs. So this is, I would use this in a 5th grade classroom, and you can see that the task card, it says, if the flat has a value of blank, what number is modeled? So the learning goal is understanding the grouping nature of our number system, but by changing the value of the blocks, now students are working towards that learning goal either with whole numbers or decimals. So this, and actually it wasn't number 1 that I was just reading, number 4. So number 4, you see I've got, 4 groups of 5 rods. So I've got 20 rods modeled, and those rods could be, they could have a value of 1/10 if the flat has a value of 1, or it could just have a value of 10. But regardless, students are going through the process of having to bundle or compose a 100 with those 10 rods, and they have to do that until they're all done. So the learning goal is the same, but changing the value of the blocks allowed us to meet students at different levels of understanding. So we can use the manipulatives to change the content without the learning goal, but we can also use the manipulatives to explore concepts in a way that makes the most sense to students. So we're changing how they go about exploring a concept. And so let's take a look at this activity right here. So this activity, this is a volume activity. The learning goal is to understand the additive nature of volume through rectangular prisms. So again, I don't want you to get hung up on the activity itself, but think about the differentiation strategy and what it looks like in this activity. So that way you can apply it to activities that are in your curriculum or maybe resources that you have. And so here we've got the learning target, and then the way that this is done, this activity, I should probably explain this so you'll understand the differentiation strategy. So with this activity, students are building one rectangular prism and finding the value, and they're building another rectangular prism and finding the volume. And then they are combining them to make a composite figure and finding the volume in that way. So they can see how the work that they already did can help them find the volume. I keep saying value, the volume of the composite figure. And so the reason this is differentiated is because we are using unit cubes, students can work using multiple representations. So it's accessible to everybody. Some students may need to build these and break it apart and count the cubes individually. Others may be able to look at the picture of the rectangular prism and see, oh, I can see the length and the width and the height, and I can find the volume. That way, they may not even need to build it. But they can work in a group together. This can be done in a heterogeneous small group because the student who's taking one approach by actually using the math manipulatives, and the student who's taking more of a procedural approach with the volume formula, they can compare their approaches and see that the work that they both did is the same. So they both can access the task. And I will say we did our book study this summer, and one of the things that I loved that they talked about in this book study is they said that that understanding is, there's so many like nuances in understanding. And so even our students who come in, maybe they've learned the formula, in the previous grade level, but just because they know it and they can do it and they're a pro at the algorithms doesn't mean that they have the understanding that is needed behind it. And while it may not reveal itself that that's an issue right away, it will later. Kind of like we were just saying with the whole with place value. If students don't have the understanding behind just identifying the value of a digit in a specific place, that's revealed later on. And so we want students to be comparing those strategies, and even if they've got the formula, using the math manipulatives to prove it. So we're using math manipulatives to change how they go about exploring the concept. We could also use math manipulatives to offer students different ways for them to show what they know or to show their thinking. So the product looks different. So let's take a look at this activity right here. So this one these are just math mats. They're about comparing fractions. The learning goal here is that they apply strategies based on fraction sense to compare. So we're not just using like the butterfly method or some trick to compare fractions. Instead, we want them to recognize that, oh, maybe this fraction's more than 1/2 and this fraction's less than 1/2, so this one's greater. Or maybe they both have the same number of parts, but the size of the part, the denominator, is different. And so which of these fractions is greater? So we want them to use fraction sense here. Now, students likely at this point with this activity that I'm doing, at this point we've explored it, they have that fraction sense, but the way that they show their thinking is going to look different. Some students may show their thinking with a number line. Some other students may actually use like just written methods to find equivalent fractions and show it in that way. Another student may use the top space of the math mat and use math manipulatives to show the comparison between the two fractions. So here, the math manipulatives are allowing everybody to be able to compare the fractions, but the way in which they show it is different. Okay, so let's talk about actually implementing all of this. And actually, let me go back just a second, looking at all of these. So we've got the content, the process, and the product. Let me know in the comments, maybe which one of these you feel like you want to work on this upcoming school year. Do you want to work on using math manipulatives to change the content? Or maybe do you want to learn more about that? Are you wanting to explore using math manipulatives to change the process that students are using to explore math concepts? Or the products? Like which of these kind of sticks out to you as, oh, like I want to explore this or learn a little bit more or try this in my classroom? Okay, let's see. All three. Okay, great. Katrina, Catherine both said all three. Tamara said process. Joyce said product. Okay, yes, all of them are so valuable. But if you're brand new to using math manipulatives, try one. Don't try and do all three of these. Try one and try it multiple times and see how it truly helps you meet the needs of all your students. So let's talk about what this looks like to implement this in the classroom. So everything that I've shared with you. So the very first thing is you have to prioritize building your own understanding of the math concepts that you're teaching. I truly believe that the most valuable asset in the classroom is the teacher. More so than any curriculum or any program, a teacher who truly understands their content knowledge can make even the most lackluster curriculum effective. And so when you take time to build your own content knowledge, to build your own understanding of these concepts, you'll better be able to break a concept down into that learning roadmap. So the second thing is to learn how different tools and representations work together to deepen students' understanding. So I mentioned this at the beginning. We know that math manipulatives are an effective tool for learning for students, but nobody's really teaching how to actually use them. What does that look like? Why do pattern blocks reveal more about fractions than our fraction tiles, like our labeled fraction tiles? Why are base 10 blocks more effective in revealing things about our number system than place value discs? They're both great tools for different reasons, but we've got to know how to use them in a very intentional and strategic way. And then lastly, either find or create resources that are differentiated and meet the needs of your learners. And so this can look like taking some of the strategies that we talked about and pairing that with your curriculum. So maybe you have that, a great task, or a lot of teachers use Eureka, and some of their problem sets are fantastic. They've got some great questions in there. What can you do with math manipulatives to pair with that to open it up so that everybody in the classroom can work on that at a level that makes sense to them? So those are their 3 steps to implementation. Now, what you can do from here is I want you to ask yourself if you're willing to commit to try these things this upcoming school year. I know it may feel a little bit uncomfortable. It may feel different, but I think that, and sometimes it's really easy for us to go back to ways of teaching that we're used to because we are overwhelmed and because maybe this is slower, but so many teachers have said building this understanding on the front end saves you time on the back end. So I want to hear, let me know in the comments if you are willing to commit to taking something from this workshop and applying it this upcoming school year. Okay, I see some absolutely, definitely, awesome, great. Yes, stepping out of that comfort zone. Math, it's okay for math teaching to look different than what you're used to. So you have 2 options. You could totally take all the ideas and the strategies you learned from this workshop and apply it to your own teaching on your own. That is how I learned. That's the process that I went to. I was learning things from different workshops that I was attending or from different books, and I was kind of struggling through applying it on my own, but I did apply it on my own. And the second option is you could have access to a library of videos and hands-on resources, an amazing community of teachers to kind of walk alongside you and help you implement this in your classroom. I don't know what kind of school that you teach in, but I know that a lot of teachers in upper elementary start to become departmentalized. They become the only math teacher at their school. And so it's really hard to keep pushing and trying strategies and stepping out of your comfort zone when you don't have anybody else doing that alongside you. So I want to invite you to Mix and Math 360. I have poured my heart and soul into Mix and Math 360. I absolutely love it. It is what I wish I had when I first started teaching math. And actually, we have teachers who have been teaching for 20, 30, 40 years, which I just can't even wrap my brain around that, who are in Mix and Math 360 and loving it and finding a lot of value out of it. And so Mix and Math 360 is a one-of-a-kind membership designed specifically for 4th and 5th grade math teachers to help you deepen your understanding of the math concepts you're teaching and also create hands-on learning experiences for your students so that you and your students can experience growth. A lot of times we go into the school year and our focus is on student growth, but I think our focus should also be on teacher growth, because the more you grow as a teacher, every teacher is still learning. The more you grow as a teacher, the more you will be able to support your students on their growth journeys as well. And so what's included in Mix and Math 360, we have concept-specific teacher videos. So these, I'm actually going to show you a sneak peek of one right before we get into the Q&A. It'll take 30 seconds. But these are videos. I actually just recorded one this morning. It's you looking over my shoulder where I am showing you their top-down videos. You can see my hands working with the math manipulatives, talking through the learning journey, and just showing you exactly how to build students' conceptual understanding of this concept in a hands-on way. And in that, you're also building your understanding of the concepts as well. So one teacher said, I think that the best part of the membership is the videos and you explaining the concepts. It's really hard to be teaching math in a way that's different than we were taught. My kids can make connections within topics and skills like never before because they have the conceptual understanding. My kids can't stop saying, I never understood math until you became my teacher. I'm so grateful for your subscription. That is what I want for all of you. That is what I want for all of your students. And so also included in this and all of the resources that the activities that I shared, those are part of Mix and Math 360. You get those hands-on, engaging math resources that you know were designed with differentiation in mind, especially because the focus is on that hands-on aspect. I put a lot of thought into, okay, how can we design this in a way that meets the needs of all learners? And so these resources focus on conceptual understanding. While this is not a curriculum, it is these activities are supplemental. They are not just practice resources. They were designed to build that conceptual understanding. And so Ashley reached out and she said, all my students have truly benefited from using manipulatives along with the activities in Mix and Math 360. The activities give the manipulatives a purpose. I love seeing the students make connections with the manipulatives. It makes my teacher heart so happy. And so lastly, you also get access to a community of teachers to learn alongside. You know that the teachers in this community are prioritizing teaching for understanding. And so the advice that you get, the inspiration that you receive from other teachers in the community, you know that it is coming from a very similar place. Well, we have teachers in all different levels of their journey. We have some first-year teachers, and we truly have some teachers who have been teaching. I think somebody posted 41 years the other day. And so, yeah, we have all ends of the spectrum that are there to support. So you get 20 plus concept-specific teacher videos, of course, new ones as well, because like I said, I just recorded one right before I hopped on this workshop. And then you get 75 plus hands-on activities for 4th and 5th grade. You get the community, plus some additional bonuses. So we have a Getting Started with Math Manipulatives mini course. Whether you are just getting started with math manipulatives or you have been using them before, I think this is going to be really valuable for you. And here's why. The Getting Started obviously is, and there's resources with it as well as far as like organization and things like that. But then this next video, the deep dive into the CRA model. So that is a model or a framework that we use with math manipulatives and planning lessons for your classrooms. And a lot of times I'll hear from teachers, they'll say, oh, my students can do it with math manipulatives, but as soon as I take them away, they struggle. Well, that's because you're likely not implementing the CRA model as it was intended to be implemented. And so that training is really valuable. And then we have some deep dives on specific math manipulatives. And so we also have 2 workshop bonuses that because you attended this workshop, you can join the math small groups planning event that we have. And so what this is essentially an extension of today's workshop, because I know we can receive all of this information and sometimes we need to take time to reflect and meet with other teachers about implementing it. And so this planning event will be with, there'll be a time of Q&A with me, and then we'll do breakout groups where teachers in the community are breaking out into like groups of 6 and talking about how to implement what is learned in this workshop in their own classroom with their own math block and their own curriculum, and just have discussions around that. So that's going to be a really great time. We've done a couple of breakout groups. We just started the breakout groups this summer, and teachers have really enjoyed them. So I'm looking forward to that. And then, so that one's next week. And then the Fact Fluency Workshop, this one's going to be at the beginning of August. And this is going to be a training from me all about building multiplication fact fluency in our students through the use of effective strategies and not necessarily memorization. And then we'll also talk about how to support students who don't know their multiplication facts, even though we know that they still need to be working on grade level content. So we'll talk about some supports there. And then I'll also be walking you through how the new bundle of resources that are going to be released with this workshop that are all about fact fluency in the classroom, I'll walk you through how to use that in your classroom. And spoiler alert, a lot of it can be used in small groups. Well, all of it could be used in small groups. It just depends on how you want to use it in your small groups. So I want you to consider the cost of the financial investment that comes from buying resource after resource on TPT, and maybe some work and some don't work for your students, or maybe even the investment of attending conferences to learn. Some of these in-person conferences are really expensive for teachers. Or the time commitment of traveling to in-person PD or reading a variety of PD books. Sometimes, I love PD books, don't get me wrong. My husband said when he married me, he was like, I did not know that we were gonna spend our entire life savings on math PD books. So I love them, but there is a time investment in that. And then lastly, just the mental investment of struggling through applying new learning on your own. I did some in-person teaching last month and I loved it. But at the end, teachers were coming up and they were asking questions. And it's like, I can't support them beyond that one session. And so having that support is so incredibly valuable. And so you get all of this for $24 a month or $240 per year. It's completely up to you whether you join monthly or yearly. You get this exact same things. The difference, so you get the videos and the resources and the community. The only difference is that with the annual, you get 2 months free. And so that link to join is right below. So mixandmath.com/join. And our promise to you is that this program will increase your confidence with teaching these concepts and give you the tools to transform how your students learn. So helping you create more hands-on learning experiences. And if it's not the right fit for you, you can cancel your membership at any time. So it's kind of like Netflix in the sense that you could join for a month and see if you like it. And, maybe you realize it's not the right fit and then you cancel. Or you can join and, just be binging the content and you're like, oh my goodness, I need to be in this for the entire year. I know it's going to be valuable for all the concepts I'm teaching, and you upgrade to the annual membership. But regardless, if you join monthly, you can cancel at any time. So I had this message from Veronica, and she said, I joined Mix and Math 360 because I wanted to feel confident in the concepts I was teaching. I wanted them to not just be able to do the math, but really understand and be able to apply what they've learned. And Mix and Math 360 has done just that for me. I'm so much more confident in my ability to teach the standards, and I saw my students' confidence grow as well. In each observation and review this year, I was given compliment after compliment on how I was able to help students progress from concrete, representational, and abstract. And that has brought the students to another level of understanding in the concepts that they were taught. And so that CRA model that I was talking about, the concrete, representational, abstract, she's seeing the fruit of that work. And so I want you to remember why you showed up today. You showed up because you want to create a classroom culture where students love to learn math. You want to be able to meet your students' needs in the classroom and get the most out of your small group. And maybe you want to actually use the math manipulatives that may be collecting dust in your cabinets. And then lastly, you just desperately want to go into this year feeling confident that you can support your students' needs. After 3 years of pandemic teaching, it can be really discouraging feeling like you're not able to meet students' needs, but I want you to know that you can. It's a process. You have to take steps, but you can take steps forward in that. And so I want to really quick, before we start the Q&A, I want to show you a quick tour so you can see exactly what's in the site. And so let's take a look here. Okay, so when you log in, this is the homepage. You'll see my smiling face, and then you'll have a getting started section. There is a section of just some bonus math surprises. These are fun. There's some posters and some games for students, number sense games. There's these quick checks, which are fabulous. I would definitely be using these in our small group right from the jump at the year, some number of the day. So different things, graphic organizers, things like that. So that's just some fun bonuses. And then we have the mini course right here. We've got a PD library. This includes some workshops that I've done in the past. I did one on number talks and on problem frames. I did a deep dive on division. So you'll see that. And then you've got the concepts here. So the way that this is intended to be used is that when you are planning, let's say you're planning a fraction concept, you'll come up here to fractions and you'll look for the concept that you're teaching here. And let's say you are teaching dividing unit fractions and whole numbers. And so here we've got a video. You can see it's about, I think it's 13 minutes long. And it really is just, it looks like you're looking over my shoulder as I explain these concepts and I show you different ways that we can represent the concept and build students' understanding. And so we go into the algorithm and we've got some math manipulatives here as well. So just showing the work in different ways. And then below that, there are resources that you can use in your classroom in whatever small group structure you want to use. So that is really what the inside of Mix and Math 360 looks like. So let's jump over to our Q&A. I never know what I'm going to look like after I put my camera back on because I wish you could see me back over here. I'm using my hands and I'm all over the place. So, okay, I'm going to take a look at this document real quick. and see what questions we have. So somebody asked, does the membership work for third grade teachers? I do not recommend it for teachers who teach exclusively third grade, because ultimately I would want you to get the full value out of your membership. And while there are certain things that you could use and that would be really applicable to you, it is truly designed with fourth and fifth grade teachers and the concepts that they teach in mind. And so I just don't feel like you would get the full value out of it if you were a third grade teacher who joined. Sometimes we have middle school teachers who join, and they join because they primarily work with students who or maybe they're doing intervention, and so they're really working on those fourth and fifth grade concepts, and that would be an exception. But for the most part, I don't recommend it for anybody who's not a fourth and fifth grade teacher or a coach who works with fourth and fifth grade teachers. Okay. Can you cancel anytime? What is the commitment? Yes, it is just like Netflix, or I'm trying to think of what other subscriptions it is. I mean, you join, and if after 2 months you want to cancel, you can. After 12 months you want to cancel, you can. The annual, you join, and then it renews every year unless you cancel it. So if you canceled it before the end of the year, then you wouldn't renew. So there's that flexibility. There's no fine print or commitment or anything like that. You just cancel when you are done with it. Okay. Does the Fact Fluency Workshop only come with the subscription of 360? At this point, it does. It's a brand new workshop, so I don't know what we might do with it in the future. But as of right now, it's only planned for the resources, and the workshop itself is only planned for teachers inside Mix and Math 360. Okay, so I'm jumping between questions about the membership and questions about the workshop itself. So if the teacher group is not part of the rotation and you pull kiddos, do they miss that station? How do they fit back into it? Are they responsible for their work? That's really up to you. They may miss that station, and to me, that's okay. I would say it's completely up to you. The other thing too is to think about this. So if you are grouping in a way, or your rotations are done in a way, or maybe they're only seeing 1 to 2 a day, so they're at that station for a lengthier chunk of time. Your pulled small group may be a whole lot shorter than that center, so they could go to that afterwards. But it's up to you and what that wants to look like. Typically, I am very much a fan of standards-based grading. I had to do a modified version because our school didn't support standards-based grading, or they just didn't do it just because it's a lot for parents to adjust to. And so I kind of did a modified version of standards-based grading. So I did not grade their work at centers. I gave feedback, but they weren't doing that work for a grade. So if they missed a certain station or center or whatever, it wasn't going to impact their grade at all. If it was something that I felt like they really needed to work on for, like, it was going to extend their learning in some way, then yeah, I may switch up what they did the following day. But yeah, I wasn't grading their work at centers. Okay, how do we push the higher students that feel they don't need to use manipulatives? Okay, I think this is a misconception. It is not that manipulatives are there necessarily because it's needed. Manipulatives are there because it deepens our understanding of a concept. There is a video that I recorded on YouTube. I think it is the Math Manipulative Myth video. It's a blue cover. I think it's that one. But in there, I have a screenshot of an activity. It's with pattern blocks. And it is so challenging. It is challenging for teachers. And it's really just, it's like, here's a picture of these pattern blocks. It's like, what's the value of this pattern block? And giving students like that a task similar to what I just explained shows them that it is not, they're not tools for students who struggle. It's part of how we do math in this classroom. We talked about that at our planning session a couple weeks ago when we're talking about how to start the year off with values and norms. And I think it's really important to say, in this classroom, as mathematicians, this is what we do here. And using manipulatives and using visuals and using that to show our thinking, that's just what we do. And so starting off the year with that, and then also maybe giving them some tasks like that where they can see oh, math manipulatives just aren't for students who struggle. They can actually be a challenge, is really good for them. So watch that video. Like I said, I think it's the blue cover, and it's just math manipulative myths. Do you have suggestions for must-have manipulatives for 4th and 5th grade? Okay, yes. If you go to my YouTube channel, which you're on YouTube right now, there is a video. It is pink, and it's literally called Must-Have Math Manipulatives for 4th and 5th grade. So you'll get information there. What standards are you aligned with? Okay, so this is a great question. We're talking about Mix and Math 360. So I use Common Core to determine what concepts are going to be included, but I would not say that they are best practice for teaching, or not even best practice, like how you add and subtract fractions, the why behind it is the same no matter what your standards are. So I use Common Core to decide like what concepts are going to be included, but no matter what state you're in or the nuance of the standard, like the why behind why an algorithm works is the same, and it always has been the same. So we have tons of teachers who use Common Core or have modifications of Common Core, and we have a ton of Texas teachers. Like typically my Texas teachers are the ones that are like, oh, is this gonna work for me? We have so many Texas teachers, and ultimately it's great for them because they enjoy it. Because when you join, you have access to 4th and 5th grade. You don't have to choose one or the other. So a lot of like our 4th grade Texas teachers will pull some things from 5th and pull some things from 4th. But if you're wanting to know like specifically like what concepts are included and why, it's just based off the Common Core concepts. Let's see, another question. I think I talked about this. Do you have, oh wait. My math block does not allow time for a small group. Can these skills be applied within the lesson, like making a small group block? I'm not sure what you mean with that, but the whole idea that your math block does not allow for small groups. What I would do if you have a short math block, like 45 minutes or an hour, that was kind of where I was getting at when I was talking about planning in chunks of days. So thinking about your math block in like 2 or 3 day chunks. And so maybe one day we are working on those whole group small groups, the concurrent or the non-rotational small groups. And we have our opening routine. So it's like a number of the day or a problem of the day or a number sense routine. So you start with that and then you get into that whole group. And then maybe you have some type of closing that's like a time of reflection. And then maybe the same day you open up similarly, you close similarly, but in between there, maybe you're doing those independent small groups in that pulled small group. I didn't mention this, but that pulled small group can also happen during the whole group as well. You can pull students when they're working independently on those tasks. You can pull them during that time. Again, remember, it only has to be like 10 to 20 minutes or whatever is needed based on the learning target or the goal of that pulled small group. So second day might be the independent groups and the pulled small group. And then maybe the third day you have kind of a mix of both. Maybe students only do 20 minutes of whole group and 20 minutes of that independent group. Maybe they're only going to one station or one center, or they're just working on one part of the choice board. Give yourself the freedom to be flexible in that every single day does not have to look the same. I'll have to repost. I will repost it over on Instagram. I'm just mixing math on Instagram. That quote that I shared last week from a NCTM publication, but it's fantastic. And it'll give you some comfort in not having a set structure for every single day. Okay, let's see. Some other questions. Tips for bridging learning gaps from COVID. So there's a lot of work has been put out about this, and they're saying the best way, and this has really been my approach. I talked about this at another workshop. It was a while ago. But thinking about, this is again why it's so important to make this learning roadmap. Thinking about the concept that you're currently teaching, and then thinking about how you can bring in maybe previous skills or concepts, how you can work on those alongside the current concept that you're teaching. If we are focusing only on skills. I once had a group of students and in 5th grade, and there were several students who like didn't even know even and odd numbers. And I spent so much time trying to build their understanding of that. And what ended up happening is they got further and further behind on grade level content. Whereas that could have been, I could have had that in the back of my mind, like, oh, it might be really helpful as we're working on grade level content, as I'm giving them supports to access grade level content, to have that discussion of, oh, what do we think? Like, do we think this is even or odd or why? Just having those discussions, infusing it in with grade level content. But the recommendation is not to go back and hyper focus on those skills, but to essentially infuse those concepts alongside grade level content. Because if we think about it, if we're constantly going back and we're remediating second grade and third grade and all of that, and that's what it looks like, they're just getting further and further behind. So think about the piece of learning that directly is needed for what you're currently teaching. Let's see, some other questions. Is there a similar product for sixth grade? I think I already answered that when I was talking about third grade. How many fifth grade activities are provided? I would say at least half of the membership is fifth grade. And there are a lot of teachers who will pull, fifth grade teachers who will pull those fourth grade resources to bring in to their math block as well for students who need it. Can you show the membership videos to students directly, or are they meant only for teachers? They are meant only for teachers. I use a lot of my explanations, I should say, are directed towards teachers. So it is, I wouldn't feel comfortable showing them to students. That's not my, and I also talk, I talk in the video in a way that you can tell I'm talking to teachers, if that makes sense. It's really more professional development for you so that you can then take that and apply it and use the resources and apply it with your students. Let's see. Would you suggest doing warm-ups and number talks during that whole group time? So I don't know if I mentioned this, but you can still have that opening routine before that whole group time. So you can still do like a number talk or a like problem of the day. That's a really great and I think important opening routine. How can I make my pulled small group more student-centered? Okay, so that's a great question. I would say lead with students' thoughts. I don't know if you've ever heard of cognitively guided instruction, but what it is it's basically saying like all students have this experiences that are valuable and they can do more than what we think they can do. They have like an intuitive approach to things. So a lot of times we think like word problems, for example, are there to challenge students and they can't do word problems until they understand the math, and that's not the case. We can give students those word problems, those situations up front, and they can explore it with different representations, whether it's manipulatives or pictures or having those conversations and talking about, you know, what, like, how would we act this out if we were doing this in real life? Like dividing fractions, for example. We think that this is like such an advanced concept, and it is, but a lot of students are dividing fractions on a day-to-day basis and they don't even realize it. Like any student who is feeding their dog, you know, cups of, or 1/4 cup of dog food every day, like they have experience with that. And so bringing those situations in, leading with that, letting them explore, and then facilitating the discussion afterwards to guide them towards whatever the learning is. So maybe you're trying to guide them towards a specific representation or a specific algorithm. And so helping them make that connection. So I think it becomes student-centered when you're leading with student understanding before you are telling or teaching, if that makes sense. Okay. Would this be useful in a fourth grade resource classroom? I would say yes, because our resource students, I think teachers sometimes are so, they maybe like not underutilize or underemphasize, I don't know what I'm trying to say, undervalue the impact that manipulatives can have. And so those students, your fourth grade resource students, they obviously have, they likely have some missing understanding or unfinished learning, or they have some gaps in their understanding. And so learning how to support them from a conceptual approach versus very much procedural is going to be so beneficial. I find that our students who are struggling, typically remediation for them looks like drilling the algorithm over and over and over so that they can catch up. We think, oh, they don't have time to build the conceptual understanding behind it. But what happens is a lot of our students who maybe have some learning differences, they struggle with those procedures. And so they need to have the understanding behind it. They need to be able to fall back on that understanding when the algorithm fails them or when the steps become overwhelming. So I definitely think it would be beneficial. Would you recommend joining as a math coach? Yes, I totally would recommend joining as a math coach because it will allow you to better support your teachers, maybe to better facilitate some PLCs with them, especially if you're a math coach, maybe who only has experience teaching like K through 3, but you're expected to coach K through 5. this would be great for you to be able to build your understanding. And then also talk to your administrator about, we do accept purchase orders. So talk to your administrator about getting your teachers in as well. So you have, this would be an easy thing to use to lead some meetings with your teachers, to show the video, we watch it, we sit, and we talk about how we're gonna apply it in our classrooms with your curriculum and all of that. So absolutely. Okay, so time is up. I just want to say thank you so very much. I know I still have some questions. I would love to hear your takeaways. Post them in the Upper Elementary Math Teachers Facebook group. For those of you who joined, I cannot wait to get to talk math with you more inside the membership. But I hope you have some great takeaways from this. Thank you so much for joining me today. I cannot wait to talk math with you again very soon, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.